Okay, I'll go ahead and get started this morning by just welcoming all of you guys. Sawadee Kap, welcome. Nice to see all of you guys this morning. Welcome to anyone who's joining us online as well. Today is the fourth day of our 5-day course, and today we're going to start with chanting and meditation like we do each day, giving you guys an opportunity to practice breathing mindfulness meditation. Since we've been meditating together for a few days, and you guys are going to need to start transitioning this into being able to do it on your own, I'm not going to provide any guidance for the meditation today. I'm just going to chant, and then we'll go into the meditation, giving you guys a chance to meditate on your own without guidance, because that's what you're going to ultimately need to be working towards anyway. So we might as well get that started here in the class, giving you guys a chance for that. And then after the meditation, then we'll talk about this first topic of what is Kamma and how does it affect me. Everything we've been talking about all week long has been about this natural law, but now we're going to go in and talk about it specifically, helping you to understand 4 different types of Kamma and how to actually extinguish your unwholesome Kamma. Then after our break, we're going to move into talking about what is merit and how to get continued support on the path to enlightenment. Of course, we'll take our lunch break, and then when we come back, I'm going to teach you how to integrate the teachings into your life, in your day-to-day life, so you can get real benefit. And at some point, we'll talk about the field trip tomorrow. In case you guys are interested in joining, I'll explain to you guys what this is and how it works and all that good stuff. So if you'd like to join for meditation, you feel free to take whatever position you'd like. Even if you'd like to do walking meditation, because you guys know that now, feel free to do whatever you'd like. I'm just going to chant, go into meditation, and then afterwards I'll chant some more. So whatever you'd like to do for meditation is totally up to you. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanhang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅgho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาโพตังมหาเกวันนังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to everyone. Nice to see you all this morning. Welcome to Watang Yu. So your chanting is coming along. I heard when we were going into meditation, I could hear you guys chanting. It sounds really nice. Kind of harmonizing together. It's really nice. And also, I shared with you guys at the beginning of the week that I was going to slowly build you up to 30 minutes of meditation per session. And I've been gradually expanding our meditation each morning and each afternoon. This was a 30-minute meditation. So you were able to build up to that point. So if this felt kind of long and it was like a little bit of a stretch for you, that's actually really good because you're actually building up to that. If you did this meditation, you're like, whoa, this is like pretty nice. Like, yeah, I was able to do this pretty readily. Well, you can see that you're able to do 30 minutes of meditation, so you can just keep with this because you would like to build up to 2 or 3 sessions for 30 minutes or more per session. That's what you would like to ultimately build up to, and you guys have essentially built up to that today by getting to this 30-minute session. And oftentimes students will take 6 months, a year, even 2 years to build up to 2 to 3 sessions per day for 30 minutes or more, because you got to kind of clear some things out of your life and start developing your practice more and more. So just understand that even though you did 30 minutes today, you may not be fully practicing 2 or 3 meditations per day, 30 minutes or more yet. You still need to kind of work on that and have a tendency to do that more and more. But that's where you're going to see the most benefits. As I mentioned to you, the Buddha meditated 3 times a day, morning, midday, and evening. And when you build up to that level of practice, you'll really see the benefits. Because whatever you would get done in, say, 1 month of doing 1 meditation a day, you actually are going to accomplish much more when you have 2 you're going to accomplish the same thing in 2 weeks rather than 1 month. And then when you add a third one, wow, you're really going to be, seeing a lot of progress in your practice. So you guys might look at doing that and kind of slowly building up to that point, not putting pressure on yourself, not racing or not thinking you're in a competition with anybody. It's your own practice, but just be attentive to it and gradually build it up over time. So as I mentioned, I'm going to share with you guys this topic of what is Kamma and how does it affect me. Everything I've been sharing with you is about the natural law of Kamma in one way or another. But now we're going to go in and talk about it specifically. And just like always, you're more than welcome to ask any and all questions. For those of you guys here at the temple, we have the microphones for you guys, so the folks online will be able to hear you. And then if you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can put your question in the comment section. I'll be able to see that. Or if you're in Zoom, you can raise your hand and ask any questions that you like. So first, let's just talk about what is Kamma from a high level and kind of demystify this natural law. Some people refer to it as karma. You might have heard that because that's from the Sanskrit language, where the Pali word is Kamma. And anyone who's studying the original teachings of the Buddha, they might actually use the word Kamma because this is the Pali language from the original teachings of the Buddha. It's referring to this natural law, and this natural law is affecting us whether we're aware of it or not. It's a natural law that is affecting us at all times. It's functioning at all times. Everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. It's not just if you understand it, it's affecting you. It's actually affecting you at all times, whether you're aware of it or not. And the way to think about the natural law of Kamma is cause and effect, or action and result, essentially like a sequence of events. It's nothing mystical or magical. It's cause and effect, or action and result. And if this word Kamma translated to just one English word, I would just use that because it'd be easier for everyone, but it doesn't. So you can think about it as this sequence of events, that there's going to be some decision that's made, and then there's going to be some results. And if it's a wise decision, it's going to produce wholesome results, or wholesome Kamma. If it's an unwise decision, it's going to produce unwholesome Kamma, or unwholesome results. So it's cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. Everything you do in life is going to produce some type of result. This natural law is affecting every being, whether we're aware of it or not. There's no entity or being that's overseeing this natural law. It's just functioning at all times. It's not about punishments and rewards. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. It's nothing mystical or magical like this. The natural law of Kamma is functioning, and you're going to experience the results of it based on your intentions, your speech, and your actions. These are certain decisions that you're making. Your intentions, speech, and actions are a result of your decisions. So when you're making decisions based in wisdom, based in your intentions, speech, and actions, it's going to produce wholesome results. But when you're making unwise decisions around your intentions, speech, and actions, it's going to produce unwholesome results. So it's not this system of punishments and rewards. It's not about who's at fault or who's to blame. It's not this black cloud that's following you around. I've heard all these kinds of things. Some people think that it's a bank account that you're depositing into and you're making withdrawals from. That's not what the natural law of Kamma is. You can see it really simply, that at some point you earned some money. And because you earned some money, you were able to purchase some clothes. And when you purchased clothes, you were able to go outside and meet other people. And then when you go outside and meet other people, you can have friends. And then when you have a problem, you have somebody to talk to, right? So there's this sequence of events. All these sequence of events have led to a certain wholesome Kamma, that you now have friends, right? There were certain decisions that you made that led to that. It wasn't just some mystical or magical thing. There wasn't some being that did this for you. These were the results of your decisions that you experienced this. So as I mentioned, it's not this mystical, magical thing that's following you around. It's not a black cloud that's following you around. It's literally cause and effect, or action and result. Real simply, you can see that when you're polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, people tend to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to you. That's the results of your decisions. And conversely, when you're impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful, then you're going to experience that. That's what's going to come back to you. So everything you experience in life is a result of your decisions. It's not good luck or bad luck. It's not destiny or fate. There's no being who's controlling what it is that you experience. If you subscribe to that type of thinking, that means you're locked in. There's nothing you can do to fix anything about your life because it's good luck or bad luck. You have no control over that. And if it's a destiny or fate, you have no control over that. You can't change that. Or if it's some being that's controlling you and you're experiencing these things, you have no ability to control that. Or if it's everybody else that is the reason why you're experiencing what you experience in life, again, you have no ability to control that. And if you resign yourself to that type of thinking, then you're basically stuck. But what the natural law of Kamma is doing for you is helping you to see that everything you experience is a result of your decisions. And if there's anything that you don't particularly care for in your life, you just cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. This is where the natural law of Kamma is very empowering. But the mind has to be willing to be able to see this, that it's not destiny or fate or good luck or bad luck or other people that are causing you to experience the things that you're experiencing. When you can see this with your own eyes, which I'm going to help you to be able to see, then it's very empowering. Because as I mentioned, if there's anything that you don't care for in your life, cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. It puts you in the driver's seat, essentially. So just as a summary, this natural law of Kamma is cause and effect or action and result, the results of your decisions. It's your life, it's your decisions, and it's your results. Everything that you're experiencing is from your decisions. Like think about the hairstyle that you have right now. Who chose that? It was you, right? Think about the clothes that you're wearing. Who chose that? It was you. Who chose to come here to the temple or listen to this video or this podcast online? It was you, right? Everything that you're experiencing is a result of your decisions. What you ate for breakfast, it was your decision, right? It wasn't destiny or fate. Everything was your decision, right? So it's your life, your decisions, and your results. A couple of things from the Buddha on the natural law of Kamma that illustrate two specific points. I'm going to explain these to you. I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to explain it to you, but it's very self-explanatory because the Buddha taught very clear, very concise, and very precise. But now that you're approaching the natural law of Kamma, these are two important teachings to understand related to the natural law of Kamma. Out of this book series, there's one book that's actually dedicated to the natural law of Kamma, but we could really say the entire book series is the natural law of Kamma because that's what the Buddha is teaching you all the way through is this cause and effect or action and result. But these are just two specific points that it's important to understand as you're approaching the natural law of Kamma. Here he says, beings are the owners of their Kamma, the heirs of their Kamma. They have Kamma as their origin, Kamma as their relative, Kamma as their resort. Whatever they do, wholesome or unwholesome, they are its heirs. What he's saying here is you're the one who's producing Kamma for yourself. Nobody else can produce it for you. Sometimes you might hear people say, oh, don't rub off your bad Kamma on me, right? This isn't actually possible. You can't rub off your bad Kamma, and you can't rub off your good Kamma to other people either. Whatever decisions you make, that's what's going to lead to the results that you experience. And that's what the Buddha is saying here, is that it's your decisions that lead to any particular result. Then he says here, the result of Kamma, I say, is threefold, to be experienced in this very life, or in the next rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. What he's saying here is you can't run and hide from your Kamma. Any decisions that you make, either wisely or unwisely, you're going to experience the results of that, either in this life, the next life, or some future life. Now, remember, everything in the path to enlightenment is independently verifiable. There's no belief whatsoever, including the cycle of rebirth. I never encourage anyone to believe anything, including the cycle of rebirth. You can independently verify the cycle of rebirth, and some people, when they get to that point, they're able to do that through the resources that I share. There's 17 different things that I share of how to actually independently verify the cycle of rebirth. But let me just give you a couple of things here that you can think about. So if you've ever had what we call deja vu, where you're experiencing something and you know that it didn't happen in this life and it just feels utterly familiar to you, this is your residual memories that are surfacing to the mind from a past life. Or if you've ever seen or heard of, like say, a 4-year-old or 6-year-old child that has never seen a piano a day in their life, and they walk over to the piano and they can play masterful piano. This is an individual who has residual memories from their past lives. They never even seen a piano, but yet they can play masterful piano. They're having these residual memories that are coming back to their mind, and now they're able to apply wisdom that they had in their previous lives in this life. So people walk around believing that you only have one life, but you don't have any evidence that you only have one life. The only thing is you just can't remember your previous lives at this point. But as you start eliminating more and more pollution out of your mind, you might actually observe your past lives. You might start having these vivid memories. And some people, even without even training of the mind, they have deja vu, which is residual memories surfacing to the mind. So there's all this evidence in the world that you can see that is actually pointing to the cycle of rebirth. But oftentimes people push that aside, or they don't connect all the dots, and they don't see that this is actually what it's pointing to. So you can independently verify the cycle of rebirth, and this is part of what the Buddha is teaching you. But here what he's sharing with you is any kamma that you create, any decisions that you make, either wholesome or unwholesome, you're going to experience the results of that, either in this life, the next life, or some future life. So you can't run and hide. So when you understand this and you can independently verify it, then the next question becomes, well, if I'm the one who's producing kamma and I can't run and hide from it, how can I create kamma that's going to be wholesome? Because why would I ever be interested in producing unwholesome kamma? It would be kind of like walking down the beach on the sand, kicking up sand, and then it keeps blowing back in your face, and you're like, oh, I really like that. I'm going to keep doing that over and over and over again, right? We don't do that. When we experience these unwholesome results, we're like, whoa, how do we get all this stuff to stop? Oh, just stop kicking up the sand. So what I'm going to teach you here is the 4 types of kamma, and essentially how to stop kicking up the sand so you can eliminate your unwholesome kamma and get to the point where you only experience wholesome kamma. You can only experience wholesome results coming back to you. By the time you get to enlightenment, that's what you're experiencing. You're experiencing only wholesome results coming back to you. So you need to understand these 4 types of kamma in order to be able to get to this point. There's wholesome kamma and unwholesome kamma. There's old kamma and there's new kamma. What wholesome kamma is any decisions that you make that are harmless. When you're making decisions that are not causing harm, that are harmless, you will produce wholesome kamma. So for example, right now you're just sitting here. You're just listening to someone speak. You're not harming anyone. And that's why it's producing wholesome kamma. You're learning wisdom. Whereas if you were like poking the person in the eyes that's next to you, you're causing harm. And now there's going to be harm that comes to you as a result, right? So this wholesome kamma is anytime you're making harmless decisions. Then unwholesome kamma is anytime you're making harmful decisions, when you're harming another being. Remember, you can't cause another being to be angry or frustrated or agitated, but you can cause harm. You can cause harm to them physically. You can cause harm to their material possessions. You can cause harm to their reputation, things like this. So when you're making decisions that are harmless, then it's going to produce wholesome results for you, or wholesome kamma. When you're making decisions that are harmful, then it's going to produce unwholesome kamma, or unwholesome results. So you would like to make more and more decisions that are harmless. And that's what the Buddha teaches you in the Eightfold Path. When I taught you guys that on Tuesday, you were learning about your intentions, speech, and actions and livelihood that are harmless. He's explaining to you how to do things like speaking and bodily actions and certain livelihood that you can fulfill and choose to have that are harmless, that aren't causing harm to other beings. So then you can produce more and more wholesome kamma. Then there's something called old kamma and new kamma. What old kamma is any decisions that you've made in the past that you're experiencing the results of now. What your new kamma is any decisions you're making now that you're going to experience the results of in the future. So let me give you some examples of this. Let's just say 3 years ago, I was working on my taxes, and say I was filling out my tax forms to report my income to my government. And say 3 years ago, I lied on this tax form. And now 3 years later, I'm getting a notice in the mail that says, hey, we caught an error on your tax form. You owe us $1,000 from that error. You owe us $1,000 penalty, and you owe us $1,000 interest. You owe us $3,000. This is old kamma coming back to me because I lied 3 years ago. And lying, we know, is harmful, and it's going to cause difficulties in our life. And now I'm getting this letter from the government that is telling me that I owe them $3,000. Well, now, whatever decisions I make in the present moment are going to produce new kamma. right? If I call up the government and I start yelling and hollering and screaming at them or trying to lie to them or something else like this is producing new unwholesome karma. Or if I didn't know these teachings and I just ripped up the paper and I was trying to run and hide from this, now that's going to produce unwholesome karma too, right? It's going to be new karma that is unwholesome. But what you would like to do is you would like to now extinguish this old unwholesome karma that's coming back to you. And if you understand the natural law that you can't run and hide from this, and that it would be unwise to rip up the paper or yell and holler and be impolite to the government, what you might decide to do is call them up or write them a letter, apologize, say, I'm so sorry, I made this error, I take full responsibility for it, but I really apologize, I don't have $3,000, I can't pay you for that. And they're like, oh, you're being so kind, you're being so polite. I tell you what, we'll take off the penalty, we'll take off the interest. You just owe us $1,000. And you might say, hey, I'd really like to give you that $1,000, but I don't even have that. I really apologize, I'm sorry. But now because you're using right intention, right speech, right action, now the government says, you know what, we can work out a payment plan. How about if you pay us over time, maybe $100 a month, and then we'll be able to eliminate this from your record. You're like, sweet, this is great. So now in the present moment, you've now made new wholesome karma because you're practicing the teachings. You're practicing right intention, right speech, right action, and all the other teachings. And now you're producing new wholesome karma. So any old karma that's coming back to you, you would like to extinguish it. You're going to need to extinguish it like burying it. And I'm going to explain to you guys how to do that here in a moment, right? So do you guys have any questions on wholesome karma or unwholesome karma or old karma and new karma, what these are? For those of you guys online, remember you guys can ask questions as well. Let me just check, see if we have questions online here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. Okay, so now let me share with you the words of the Buddha, more on how you produce wholesome karma and how you produce unwholesome karma, because this connects to something that I taught you yesterday. Okay, here's the words of the Buddha on how you create unwholesome karma. Whenever you're making decisions through those three poisons or those three unwholesome roots or those three fires, that's what's producing the unwholesome karma. When you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance. And for those of you guys that maybe weren't here or you weren't tuned in online yesterday, I'll just give you a little bit of a summary of what these are. What craving is your selfish desires, your longing, your yearning, wanting things to be permanently satisfying, your wants, your expectation, where you're chasing after the objects of your affection. You want things to be fully satisfying for yourself. This is the selfish desires that the mind has. Whenever you're making decisions that are based on your own selfishness, then it's going to produce unwholesome karma for you. Or when you're longing, yearning, you're chasing after things, wanting things to be a certain way, it's going to produce unwholesome karma for you. And then there's anger or ill will, hatred, frustration, agitation, annoyance. Whenever you're making decisions through that, it's going to produce unwholesome karma for you. It's going to produce unwholesome results. And then when you're making decisions through ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, that's going to produce unwholesome karma for you too. And you can independently verify these, right? Look at situations where you had craving, desire, attachment, you were chasing after things, you were longing and yearning, wanting things to be a certain way. It produced unwholesome karma for you. Or look at times when you were bitter and harsh and hostile, when there was this frustration and agitation and annoyance in the mind, and you started making decisions through that. It produced unwholesome karma. Or when you had a lack of wisdom, when you had this unknowing of true reality, not understanding these natural laws, this is going to produce unwholesome karma for you. So whenever you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's producing unwholesome results or unwholesome karma. And then in order to produce wholesome karma, you would like to practice the wholesome roots, which is what we talked about yesterday too. Generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. The generosity is the giving and sharing more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources. Whenever you're practicing generosity, look at those situations. You'll see that it produces wholesome results for you. Maybe if you worked in a work environment, you brought some bagels or some fruit into work, you can see that it produced wholesome results. Or any other thing that you're doing where you're practicing pure generosity, it's going to produce wholesome results. Then when you're practicing loving kindness, which is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, active goodwill towards all beings, this is going to produce wholesome results for you too. And then when you're practicing based in wisdom, wise decision making, based in the natural laws of existence, this is going to produce wholesome results for you. So what you're doing is you're slowly using the tools and techniques of the Buddha to bring down your craving, desire, attachments, your anger, hatred, ill will, your ignorance, your delusion, your unknowing of true reality, your misunderstandings. You're gradually bringing that down in the mind and making less and less decisions through that. And then you're gradually increasing your generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom to be able to practice decision making more and more through that. And this is what's going to help you to transform the mind. So the way that you extinguish or eliminate your unwholesome kamma is through the eightfold path. Those 8 individual steps that I taught you on Tuesday is extinguishing your unwholesome kamma. When you start making decisions through right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, this is what's going to extinguish your unwholesome kamma. Because if you could snap your fingers right now, which you can't, and snap your fingers and instantly practice the teachings of the Buddha, you're still going to experience unwholesome results because you've made unwise decisions in the past, and you're going to experience unwholesome kamma coming back to you. This is your old kamma. So even though you can't snap your fingers and instantly practice the teachings of the Buddha, you're going to experience unwholesome kamma. It's kind of like what we've been doing throughout our life is putting mud into a garden hose. We've been shoving mud into this garden hose. And now what you might be choosing to do is hook this garden hose up to a faucet, and you're opening up the faucet to get some clean water through this garden hose. Well, if you meditate once a month, if you come to the temple once every 6 months, you've got like a little drip going through this impacted garden hose. But what you would like to do is open up that faucet wider and wider and wider, get more and more clean water coming into your garden hose. Get more and more clean decisions, wise decisions going into your life, right? And as you put more and more clean water into your garden hose, it's going to start spitting out this mud. This mud is going to come out for a while because you've made unwise decisions in the past. You're going to have to experience that. So this garden hose is going to spit mud. But every once in a while, you're going to see some clean water come out. Then it's going to spit some more mud. Then you're going to see some clean water, clean water, clean water. Then it's going to be more mud. Then it's going to be clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water. And then you're going to get some mud. But then eventually it's going to be clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water, because you've only been putting wise decisions into your life. So this is what you would like to be able to do, is put more and more wise decisions into your life by practicing the Eightfold Path, which of course includes meditation and other things that you've been learning about. You're going to need to practice all these things in order to transform the mind. But you're going to need to experience the unwholesome kamma coming back to you. But when it's coming back to you, you would like to make wise decisions to extinguish it, so that then you can now have nothing but wholesome kamma coming back to you. I'll give you some examples from my life so you can see how this works. So in the past, when I was growing up, I grew up in a very hostile environment. I learned that if someone doesn't do things your way, you basically yell and holler at them until they do things your way. This is essentially the way I was taught growing up, and this is what I observed among the adults around me. So as I was growing up, I was doing this to a certain extent. Of course, I was polite and kind and friendly here and there, but there were certain situations where I would be rude and impolite and disrespectful. So, example with my wife. My wife and I, we've been together for 17 years right now. And when we first met, of course, I was polite and kind and friendly, right? But there were certain times where things weren't going my way, and I would be bitter and harsh and hostile to my wife. And I was doing this throughout our relationship. And then she would be bitter and harsh and hostile back to me too. But around the 11-year mark, I decided I was going to do something different. I was tired of this life. I was tired of doing things the way that I had been doing them, and I was looking to transform my mind. And I started training my mind, and I started being more loving and kind, more generous, more wise, practicing these wholesome roots. But I had created this unwholesome kamma in the past. So even though I had transformed my mind, and I was calm, and I was being gentle, and I was being friendly, and I was being loving, my wife was still bitter and hostile and harsh with me. Right? There were times where I would walk into the house and she would just start yelling at me for things that she had in her mind, right? And this was my unwholesome karma coming back to me because I had done these things in the past. So even though I had transformed my mind, it was only 1 month, 2 months, 3 months that I had been doing that. So there was still this unwholesome karma coming back to me. So in the past, if she would have been bitter and harsh and hostile with me, I would have been bitter, harsh, and hostile right back. But I knew that that's unwise. Putting out that argumentative speech, that aggressive and hostility, it's only going to produce more of that coming back to me. So there were some situations where she was being bitter and harsh and hostile with me, where I would just be quiet and I would just walk away. I just wouldn't listen to it. I would just walk away. I wouldn't engage with it. There was other situations where she was being bitter, harsh, and hostile, and I would just sit there and I would listen to her. And then when she was done, I would say, "Thank you, dear." And then I would why her and I'd walk away. And then there would be other times where I had even more control over my mind and she was being bitter and harsh and hostile. And I would say, "Okay, anything else?" And she was like, "Yeah, you did this and you did that and you're such a bad husband and you did this." I was like, "Yeah, you're right. I was a bad husband. You're 100% right." I was like, "Get it all out. You're right. I was really bad. I did those things. You're right. But I'm not doing those anymore." And then she would yell and holler and scream. And I was like, "Anything else, dear? Anything else?" And because I knew she had to extinguish it. She had to get it all out. And after she got it all out, I would why her and I would walk away. I was calm. I was peaceful. I was gentle. I didn't put any bitterness or hostility back. So it took about 1.5 years. And eventually she extinguished all of this. Slowly but surely, you could see that there was longer and longer gaps between her flaring up. Where initially it might have been every 3 days or every week. It started to be spreading out, like once a month, once every 2 months, once every 3 or 4 months, it would start happening, right? But more and more, she could see that she was the one with the anger because there was no anger coming from me whatsoever. There was no bitterness or hostility. So the way that I needed to extinguish this is I had to experience it. I had to experience that, what she was doing, because that's what I did to her in the past. But then I was able to extinguish it. And then at this point, there's no arguing. There's no hostility. There's no nothing. It's been 5 or 6 years. There's been no arguing or yelling or hollering or being upset with each other. It's been completely peaceful because I've extinguished this from my mind. She's extinguished it from her mind. And now there's nothing but a peacefulness in our relationship. But then I also saw another piece that I needed to extinguish. At the time that I started practicing these teachings closely, my son was 6 years old. He was about 5 or 6 years old. And I noticed that he was starting to be bitter and hostile and harsh with his mom because he saw dad doing this as he was growing up. So he was starting to do this with his mom. So I now needed to teach him how to be loving and kind and gentle and warm with his mom because that was my karma, that I had taught him how to do this. I didn't physically teach him, but he observed it, that I was doing these things, so that's what he started doing. So now not only did I have to extinguish my karma with my wife, I had to extinguish it with my son. And I needed to teach him how to be loving and kind and warm and gentle and have a healthy relationship with his mom. And then that's what I did. So now everything in our family is completely peaceful, completely joyful. There's never ever yelling or hollering. Sure, we have disagreements where my wife might be interested to do one thing and I might be interested to do something else. Where in the past we would yell and holler and fight until death to see who won, where now we just sit down and we talk. "Oh, what's your ideas?" "Oh, okay." She shares those with me. I share my ideas with her. And at the end of the conversation, we walk away with decisions, right? So even though we've been together for 17 years, we've been happily together for about 6 years, right? There's a difference, right? So we've been happily together for about 6 years, maybe 5 or 6 years. So it took us some time to figure this out. And I had to extinguish my karma first within my own mind. I had to extinguish my craving, anger, and ignorance. And I had to arise this generosity, this loving kindness, and this wisdom. And then I had to extinguish it with my wife, I had to help her, and then I needed to help my son. And now we have a family that is completely peaceful, and we don't argue and yell and holler at each other. It's just completely peaceful, right? So these are the things that you're going to need to do in your life. There's certain relationships that you have right now that you're probably going to need to walk away from. I had to do that. There were certain relationships that I just walked away from, that I knew that this relationship was too much hostility, too much bitterness. I wasn't committed to the relationship and I just needed to walk away from it. Then there were other relationships like my wife and my son, my mom, that I was committed to, that I had problems in, but I knew that I could solve them. If I worked on my own mind, then I could work on the relationship too. And I was able to fix that. And then we had wonderful relationships. Then there was a third category of relationships of brand new people that I hadn't even met yet, that I needed to be able to meet new people and spend time with those people. And I was only ever loving and kind with them. And that's what comes back to me. So like all of you guys, you've never seen me, and you never will see me, be angry or bitter or harsh or hostile, because it just isn't possible for my mind to do that anymore. So I've only ever been loving and kind with you guys, and that's what comes back to me, right? So there's all these thousands and thousands of people that's all they've ever known from me. So now that's how you clean up your karma, is you walk away from certain relationships that you're not committed to, and you know that there's no chance of you guys ever working these things out. And you're not committed to the relationship, maybe they're not committed to the relationship, and it's better to just walk away. Then there's a second category where you need to work on your mind. You might even put the relationship on pause for a little bit, step away, work on your own mind, then you can come back into the relationship and things can be better. And then there's this third category of people that you've never even met yet. You don't even know their names, and you'll only ever be loving and kind. Maybe some of the people here that you've only ever been loving and kind with, the people here. That's all I ever see when I'm here is love and kindness, and people spending wonderful time with each other. And now these are people that you'll only ever experience love and kindness with, because that's what you're putting out, and that's what's going to come back to you. So this is how you clean up your karma and clean up your relationships. So any questions here on how to extinguish and eliminate your unwholesome karma? Looks like we have a question coming in on Facebook here. Janae is asking, is wisdom the antidote to any and all ignorance? Yes, it's the exact opposite, right? The unknowing of true reality. And the wisdom that we're talking about here is we're talking about the wisdom of the natural laws of existence, but wisdom helps you in other parts too. Like one of the things you guys are going to see is this afternoon, there's going to be a gentleman who comes in and fixes our camera, because right now I've been back for about a week and our camera's out of focus and I don't know how to fix it. There's this gentleman that set it up for me originally a couple of years ago, and he knows how to work the camera because there's all these different settings. It's not just a simple focus. There's all these different settings, and he set it up and it was really crisp and really clear, really warm, really bright, really radiant color. But now it's not that anymore. And I don't know how to fix it. And I looked through the instruction manual. I tried to figure it out. I don't have wisdom of how to do it. So I went and found him yesterday, and he was working his way out of the flood because he works at a shop that got flooded and he had mud all over him. And I said, hey, I need your help. Can you come to the temple? And he's like, sure, I'll come to the temple. And I said, when you come this time, I'd like you to teach me how to do this, because I need to understand how to do this, right? So when we talk about wisdom, you're cultivating wisdom of the natural laws of existence, but you're going to need wisdom in other parts of your life too. And for me, I need wisdom of how to focus this camera, because this is wisdom that I don't have right now. And it's hindering me from being able to easily set this up. And because of impermanence, it's going to get out of focus sometimes, and I'm going to need to know how to do that. So wherever you're lacking wisdom, you would like to cultivate that wisdom and make sure you have the wisdom on board that you need, even if it's something like focusing a camera. But mainly when we're talking about wisdom in the teachings of the Buddha, it's about the natural laws of existence. But you're going to need other wisdom in life too. Okay, so let's see if we have any other questions. I don't see those anywhere. Okay, so the last thing that I'll share with you guys about the natural law of Kamma. Oh, Shay has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. So we have a way to extinguish new karma, so we can work on wholesome things. And then there's old karma. Is there such a thing from the Buddha's perspective and within the Pali text as past karma that we can extinguish? And how do we know that from old karma? How does it differ? And how does the mechanism for extinguishing that differ, if it does differ at all?
Sure. So what you're doing is you're extinguishing your old unwholesome karma by producing new wholesome karma. So in the present moment, making new decisions that are going to produce wholesome karma. So this example of the tax form coming back to me, right? If in the present moment, I make new decisions that are wise, then it's going to produce new wholesome karma. And I can extinguish this that's coming back to me. But if in the present moment, when this old karma is coming back to me, if I continue to make unwise decisions, I'm going to now be producing new unwholesome karma. So the way that you do this is anything that's coming back to you, because anything you're experiencing that's coming back to you, it's old karma, right? The fact that I can't focus this camera, this is karma that I need to be able to cultivate wisdom to be able to now fix this, right? This is something I need to cultivate wisdom about in order to be able to do this. So in the past, I just haven't cultivated that wisdom yet, and now I'm going to cultivate that wisdom. It's not unwholesome karma. It's just that I don't know how to do it, but I just give you that as an example. So anything that's coming back to you from the past, it's old karma. So like, for example, these floods, people have asked me like, well, is this our karma that we experienced the flood? And the answer is yes, this is our old karma. And it's not punishments and rewards, it's a sequence of events that if I chose to purchase a house or rent a house close to the river, then I'm subjected to a potential flood. And this was a decision that I made that led to this. It's not that I'm being punished or anything like that. It's just a sequence of events of things that I'm made decisions about. And now that I see, and this isn't, I wasn't affected by the floods, but now if I'm living in the house and my house was flooded and I see that this is a potential, I have choices to make. I can either choose to stay here, which means I'm going to be subjected to a flood in the future, or I can be like, whoa, I'm not interested in this happening again. Let me find a different house. And now I can move to a different house farther away from the river. And that's where I live, is I live 20 minutes away from the river. There's no way that there's ever going to be any flooding where I live. And that was a decision that I made, right? So when we make decisions, it's going to produce a certain result. And even something like a flood, and us experiencing a flood, it's a decision that we've made to choose to have a business at that location or choose to live at that location. And now there's the potential of a flood. But now that we see that and we've experienced this old unwholesome karma coming back to us, now we have a decision to make. What are we going to do in the present moment to extinguish this? And for some people, they're like, hey, this only happens every 12 to 14 years. No big deal. We'll just clean up. We'll deal with it for a couple of days. This location of our business is ideal for what we're trying to do. We're just going to write this off as a business expense. But for other people, they're going to say, hey, not interested in living here, not interested in being here, and they're going to move, right? And those are decisions that people make. So anytime you see anything coming back to you that is unwholesome, you would like to extinguish it by figuring out how to cultivate generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, and practicing that is what will extinguish any old unwholesome karma coming back to you.
Thank you, David. Including past life karma.
Yes. The way that we experience past life karma is that in this new life, you have certain cravings and residual memories in your mind, and you're making decisions now in your current life based on those old cravings. So it's not like there's this mystical, magical thing that's, you've maybe killed somebody in a past life, so now you've got to be murdered in this life. It's not that. That's not how your karma is experienced from your previous lives. So the way that you can think about this is that you have cardboard box A, which is a certain life, and that's a certain size, certain color, certain texture, certain shape of box. And then you've got cardboard box B, which is a completely different color, shape, texture. This represents two different lives or two different minds. So in cardboard box A, you have cravings and residual memories. And now at the end of this life, when this life is over, meaning the cardboard box dissolves, if there's craving and residual memories in the mind, they're going to move forward into the new mind. And now this new mind, with its cravings, is going to make new decisions in this life. And now, let's just say I'll use this example that I commonly use. Say Bob in the past was having lots of sex with lots of different people, and Bob was having a really high sexual craving. And by the time he dies, he hasn't eliminated his sexual craving. And now when he dies, his sexual cravings, those cravings and other cravings and residual memories go forward into this new life. And now let's just say Barbara is being reborn, and this is the new being. This new being, Barbara, has cravings, these sexual cravings in her mind, and she's now, say, acting on them. And say now, even though she's married and this kind of thing, maybe she has various relationships where she's having sex with lots of different people, and this is because of her cravings from her old life. And now this old Kamma hasn't been extinguished because her cravings in the mind is motivating unwise and unskillful decisions. And now maybe Barbara has sex with so many different people, maybe she gets HIV and she ends up dying at the age of 50 or something like this, right? This is the old Kamma. This is old unwholesome Kamma. It's decisions that she made in this life, but the old Kamma is from the cravings from Bob, that those never got extinguished. That's how it actually happens. Seems like you understand, right? Yeah, okay. So now let's move to and by the way, in that example that I just gave, the wise thing for Barbara to have done, but of course she didn't know how to do this, was to learn the path to enlightenment, right? If she would learn the breathing mindfulness meditation, the generosity, the meditation to eliminate sexual cravings, and all the path to enlightenment, she could have eliminated her cravings, desires, attachments, and she could have got to the point where she had the wisdom to understand that she should only have one partner, and then that would be a wise way to conduct her life. And now she wouldn't have experienced what she experienced. So at some point in the future, maybe Barbara is reborn to Susie, and Susie figures this out. Maybe Susie gets onto the path to enlightenment, and now she starts to extinguish her cravings, desires, attachments, and she doesn't have the same results as Barbara and Bob. Right? So that's what ultimately will extinguish this craving, anger, and ignorance, is by arising wisdom of what the true problem is, which is craving, anger, and ignorance. Now you can use the tools and techniques to extinguish that and experience improved results. Mm-hmm. Yep, you're welcome. Okay, so now the last thing to share on the natural law of Kamma is that sometimes when people hear me teaching the natural law of Kamma, they say, hold on a second, David, you're teaching that you can't run and hide from your Kamma, but what about that person? That microphone's still on, maybe, yeah, you can just turn it off, thank you. Just getting a little feedback. Sometimes what people say is, hey, what about that person who their bloody footprint was at the murder scene, the bloody murder weapon was under their bed, they have blood all over their car, and they went to court and they were found not guilty. Didn't they run and hide from their Kamma? Sometimes people ask me that. So what I'm teaching you is no. It's not possible to run and hide from your Kamma. This person is still experiencing their Kamma, but what you're looking at in this situation is the laws of society. The laws of society are imperfect because they can't be created and administered fairly because human beings are involved. And human beings have craving, anger, and ignorance in their mind, so they're making decisions that are unwise. So a government, while it would be wise to aspire to make more and more fair and equitable laws and enforce them more fairly and equitable, they're going to make mistakes. So a court of law is human beings trying to administer certain rules and certain laws. The natural law of Kamma is not administered by human beings. It's completely fair, and it's always going to be affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. So this individual who their bloody footprint was at the murder scene, they had a bloody murder weapon, they had blood all over their car, they're still going to be affected by the natural law of Kamma. They're still being affected by that regardless. The fact that they're not going to jail is just one aspect of their Kamma, but it's not their only Kamma. There's other things that you need to be able to look at because you might not be there when these things are happening. And you can see that they are being affected by their unwise decision to murder, and they're experiencing unwholesome Kamma. And here's some of those examples. That they're going to have a bad reputation in the community because this is all over the news. People are aware this individual has committed a murder. They're going to have a bad reputation in the community. They can experience sickness, disease, physical and mental pain. They can have a shorter lifespan. The way that this is happening is that in order to kill an individual, in order to kill a human being, there needs to be a certain amount of craving, anger, and ignorance, right? If you're doing this based in craving, anger, and ignorance, there's a certain amount of that in your mind. So that means there's a certain hostility and aggression and bitterness. And when that's going on in the mind, that's going to put stress on the organs of the body. So the heart, the lungs, and the other organs are going to suffer from this hostility and this bitterness in the mind. And now this individual having all that anger and hostility built up in the mind, putting more and more strain and stress on the body, they're going to live for a shorter period of time. So it's not anything mystical or magical. It's cause and effect. That if you allow your mind to have craving, anger, and ignorance, there's going to be hostility and bitterness and resentment in the mind. That's going to put more stress on the body, and there's going to be a shorter lifespan. This individual is going to have hostility, aggression, and fights, not just the person that they murdered were they having problems with, but if they're having problems in their relationships to the point where they needed to murder somebody, then they're having problems in other parts of their life too. Their other relationships aren't going well either. So all of this is going to be coming back to them, and they can actually be killed themselves. Right? They can have a loss of income and wealth because now people in the community aren't interested in hiring them. And they had to hire a certain amount of lawyers to be able to go to court and actually defend themselves. So they had a certain loss of income and wealth as a result of having to defend themselves in the court. They're going to be having difficulties in relationships because, again, it's not just this one relationship that was going bad and they needed to murder this person. They were having difficulties in multiple relationships. So they're not having harmonious relationships because their mind is having craving, anger, and ignorance, and they're having difficulties in their relationships. They're going to have challenges securing and progressing in employment, right? People aren't going to be interested in hiring them and promoting them to higher and higher responsible positions. They're going to potentially have issues securing housing and acquiring basic necessities to sustain life. This is all the unwholesome kamma, the unwholesome results of having chosen to kill another human being. And then ultimately, there's unwholesome kamma in terms of discontentedness. This individual can experience guilt and shame and fear in the mind, a certain amount of stress and anxiety in the mind from the actions that they took. And then rebirth itself, that if they get to the end of this life and they haven't gotten to enlightenment, they can experience rebirth in the various realms, the realm of hell, animal realm, afflicted spirits, the human realm, and the heavenly realm. So it's based on the condition of the mind at the time of death is going to determine what realm you're actually born into. So there's no being that's overseeing your entire life and the entire totality of your life and then deciding if you go to a good place or a bad place. That's not the way this works. It's cause and effect. Whatever the condition of your mind is at the time of death, that's what's going to determine if there's any rebirth at all. And if there is rebirth, what realm you're going to be reborn into. During the lifetime of the Buddha, there was actually an individual who had killed 999 people, and he actually tried to kill the Buddha as his 1,000th person. And he ended up not being able to kill the Buddha, and he ended up becoming a student of the Buddha. And he learned and practiced, and he actually got to enlightenment in that life. So this is a helpful story for you for a number of reasons to show you that you can extinguish your unwholesome kamma. And no matter what you've done in your life, I know you haven't killed 999 people. So no matter what you've done, no matter how horrible you think it might have been, you can extinguish that kamma and get to the point where you actually attain enlightenment. None of this stuff is permanent, right? Sometimes we think that when we did things in the past, that somehow we're always going to be affected by this. Nope, it's impermanent. You can extinguish all this unwholesome kamma. So this is helping you guys to see that the laws of society are one thing and the natural law of kamma is completely different. Right? The natural law of kamma is a law that's functioning at a much higher level than the actual human laws. If you are practicing the natural laws of existence, the natural law of kamma, you'll never have any issues with your government because the laws that human beings create are very minimal compared to what you would be practicing as the natural law of kamma. This is a much higher law. So by practicing that, you'll never have to worry about any government at any time. Okay, so any questions here on the laws of society? Let's see. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions online or anywhere else. So what we're going to do here is take a nice little break. It's basically 10:22. Let's come back at 10:45, which gives you over 20-minute break. And then when we come back, I'm going to teach you what is merit and continued support on the path to enlightenment. So enjoy your break, and we'll see you afterwards. Mm-hmm.